Well, the clerk has 3 business days to provide a copy of the warden's return of votes cast, which is filled out by the warden on election night, as well as to go into the central voter registration system and enter the results from the warden's return, certify it, print it out, sign it, and send it to us. And I would note that actually the clerk did that on election night. They're not required to, but in small towns sometimes they do. And I wanted to point out the certification of sealed ballot container was part of the facts of the results that were sent to us, and it was sent at 11:28 p.m. On election night to our office.
And with respect to this race, what did those numbers
Indicated the 171 votes cast and 95, 65, and I think 11 blanks.
Now, in this,
Senator Keith, could you just go through those numbers again, but more slowly? Are they?
Well, I just want to make sure I have the 95 for Breen, 65 for Manchester, 11 blanks, for a total of 171.
thank you. So, following the election, Senator Cushing, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to verify, the results were faxed to you from the town of Long Island,
Yes.
and was it the warden / town clerk that provided that to the best of your knowledge?
I mean, I don't, we didn't retain any cover sheet if there was one. There was the fax, page 2 was the certification of sealed ballot container, because that's printed out on that, and then I had the 4 pieces of the election night and the CDR return, so one for the candidate and one for the referendum. So there was the warden's return that was filled out on election night, and then the return entered into CDR and certified. And those 2 pieces constitute the requirement for the return votes cast.
Senator Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In regards to the votes that we're talking about here, correct me if I heard wrong and wrote this down. You said there were a total of 175 votes that were recorded in this race?
171 from
171, okay. Did the sheet reflect different totals for any of the other races or referendum questions on that night?
No, when they enter into the CDR, the totals all have to be the same.
Okay.
So it's a check and balance in the error check in the system. So if you have 171 total votes, all your totals for races have to come up to 171 with candidates and blanks or yes, no's and blanks.
Okay, thank you.
And maybe to state the obvious, it's not unusual to have a blank ballot. Some people don't vote for every office.
And when I say blanks, I don't necessarily mean the whole ballot was blank. I mean it's a blank vote for that race. Maybe they marked a write-in and there was no declared write-in, so it's counted as a blank, or maybe they didn't mark it at all.
Senator Saviello.
This maybe ties into the end of last conversation to this one. But was there a case where there were 21, 41 separate ballots that were not in the blue box found later on? Everything in the blue box.
Everything was in the blue box.
So in this particular case, there was a request for a recount.
Yes.
So would that have been the next communication we had from someone, or did anything happen in the meeting?
No, I think that was the next communication. Sometimes we get calls, but I think this time we got the actual request from Kathy Manchester provided to us as an attachment to an email.
Okay. And just, if there had been no request for a recount, if there had not been, what would have happened in the blue box?
They would remain in the town. There is a federal law that requires ballots from federal elections to be kept for a total of 22 months. But because there's going to be an intervening election where they need to use the blue boxes, the law allows them to open the containers at least 60 days after the election and remove the ballots from the tamper-proof containers and put them into other cartons and seal them for the remainder of the 22 months.
And so in this particular case, you did receive a request for a recount,
Yes.
and what happened then?
We created a recount alert, which we contacted the state police to talk about when they could start retrieving ballots, and I'm sure I sent you that, but the recount alert just tells the town, we want to get your tamper-proof container with voted ballots, we want your unused ballots, whatever containers you have, we want your voting list, and we want your absentee materials. So those 4 separate packages in as many numbers as they have.
So maintain the security of those, and someone's going to come and get them.
Someone's going to come and get them. And we have a transmittal form, which I believe I attached. I thought it would be easier if I pulled it apart from my notes. This is a copy of the ballot transmittal form that was signed by the trooper who picked up the ballots and the clerk. So blanks were sent to the state police as well as one to each town so that they could put the number of tamper-proof containers, the number of cardboard boxes that might contain absentee materials, the number of containers that might contain unused ballots, and then voting lists, so number of envelopes, and this is what they provided.
So for those of us who can't read that, there's one of 3 things and something of 2.
There was one tamper-proof container. We do have to redesign this form because sometimes the carton is reported in 2 different areas. I think some of the envelopes are cartons, so they have a container, they should have 2 cartons and 2 or 3 envelopes.
2 cartons of, what was it, do we know from just looking at that?
Well, there definitely were 2 cartons, and then I think they put there were 2 envelopes, but there was also an envelope listed up above, so there were actually 3 envelopes that we received. So we have the 3 circled. That was when we checked them in at the state police.
You see, it was 3 what were delivered?
It's 3 envelopes. They might have sent us their list of absentee voters and stuck it in an envelope. I mean, that doesn't have to be sealed, but
Thank you, Senator Saviello.
I just think, I can't read what's crossed out on there. What does the handwriting say? And who is it signed by?
it says envelope containing certificate of sealed ballot container. So they did not send us the certificate of sealed ballot container because they had already faxed it to us on election night.
Okay, thank you. So, it's up to Senator Hill.
Yes, sir. Go back to that again. Sounds like there's some confusion on the form, so I just want to make sure while we have the advantage of having you here, you can hear about what's on the form and what came.
So,
Excuse me, just 1 second, but for the benefit of the committee, I want to thank you. Ms. Flynn gave us a memo in advance of today, which I believe everybody has, and this form is attached to that memo.
But the public doesn't have that form, so I think it's important that we express.
unfortunately, I have to look at it and then we can post it and then show it to you because I can't.
I'd rather you walk us through as you look at it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So,
Take mine.
no, I don't
Mine
want
off.
to take this. So part of what we're doing on the right side of that is listing the types of things that we expect to be in that envelope to make sure that they're giving us all the things that we need. And unfortunately, as you can see, under the number of envelopes containing election materials, she circled number 2. So if you could just, there, your pen. And it's a copy of the final list of absentee voters. And she's put an arrow up to the container up above and said number 2 in this same container. So that list of absentee envelopes was actually in the box with the absentee envelopes, not separate. I mean, I think it's in an envelope, but I think it's inside the carton, is what I understand that to mean. So she's got the sealed incoming voting list as one of the items, she's circled that. And then for number 3, the return of votes cast, she's written in already sent. And then certificates of sealed ballot container for each blue box. She circled that, so we may have that in one of the envelopes. We didn't have to open any of those envelopes during the recount.
So they remain sealed?
Yes. Only the voting list has been opened and resealed.
And just one other thing, so since they haven't been opened, you're just making assumptions here.
That's right. Part of this is to just, I think we're gonna take all of the right side off in the future, because I think it's confusing. When I think in the future, we just want to know how many blue boxes, how many cartons, how many envelopes, and then have a separate checklist to make sure, yes, in those materials are my voted ballots, my unused ballots, my absentees, because I think they're trying to fit it in more than one category.
That sounds like a wonderful improvement for the future, but right now it is confusing. And we're making assumptions about opening those envelopes. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
So, who came down to pick up the ballots? Any other materials?
I don't know the troopers, I can't read his signature, so,
Apparently, it's Kevin Strub. Is that
okay. So, because, you know, the island communities pose a little bit of a challenge because there's a ferry schedule, and so I had called the clerk when we sent the recount alert and said, I know you've got, you know, hours, some limited hours, you know, could you bring the ballots from Long Island on the ferry into and meet the trooper at the ferry terminal. So we arranged for that Wednesday, the 13th. I mean, it was a little complicated. We started picking up ballots on Monday in some of the jurisdictions. A few of them we picked up on the Friday before. But Tuesday was the Veterans Day holiday, so town offices weren't open. Obviously, the state wasn't working. So, you know, it did go into Wednesday before we were able to retrieve the ballots. And so my understanding was that she brought them in on a boat that got into Portland at a certain time, and the trooper met her at the terminal and took materials, signed the transmittal, and
Sign this form that we were just
Yes.
referring to. Okay, so again, from election night, she stores all this stuff in a secure place. This particular day, she turns them over to the state trooper, just understanding the chain of custody, and then the state trooper is supposed to do what?
state trooper brings them back to the Department of Public Safety building in Augusta. There is generally with each recount, we have someone assigned. The last couple of cycles, Lieutenant Scott Ireland has been our contact. They have created a secure room where the materials could be placed. And they were collecting them from all 3 recounts, so bringing them in, putting them into the room, and keeping the copy of the transmittal. And then before the first recount started, the day before the Senate 11 recount started, several of my staff and I went over to the public safety building to get access to the secure ballot room to check the transmittals against the containers to make sure we had everything we were supposed to have.
In this particular case, was everything there? In this particular case,
Well, everything was there for Long Island, yes.
Okay, and then what happened with this materials?
It remained in the secure room. It is off the flooring room where we conducted the recounts, and the doors are all locked. I have to go through the state police to get access. When we arrive in the morning, we're usually there sometimes before the parties get there.
This is the morning of the recount?
Of the recount. But if I were to show up first by myself, I would not get access to the room. Wait until there's at least 2 people or more. Usually most of my staff show up at the same time. They're usually here before I am. But we get led into the recount room, and then they will open the ballot room so that we can bring the materials out. We have a table set up where the containers of ballots will be placed.
To give that a second. So during that time, these boxes are in custody of the state police?
Until the recount begins, and then they're under our jurisdiction.
So the recount is placed, in this case, took place when?
On November 18th,
So,
Tuesday.
so the morning of November 18th, people show up for the recount.
My staff, we showed up at about 8 o'clock, and I had forms to, tally sheets to put out on the tables. We all sign in, we make sure everybody has enough supplies at each of the counting stations to get the tabulation set up, everything's ready. And generally, we don't bring ballots out of the ballot room until there are other people in the room. They're outside the guardrail waiting for things to begin. And then we bring the tamper-proof containers that have the voted ballots in them. Usually, if there are a lot of ballots to be counted, and this was, I think, our biggest number. We had about 23,000 ballots to be counted amongst all the towns. So we only brought the tamper-proof containers out and left the other materials like the voting list and the unused ballots in the ballot room.
So the ballots are brought out in this blue box.
Yes.
And could you explain under law how a recount happens, and in fact, what did happen in this particular election?
So we have a sign-in sheet for the candidates and their representatives, and anyone who's going to be counting. Anyone coming in the guardrail needs to sign in, and then I have a sign-in sheet for all my staff.
So similar to the polling place, there's a rail behind which only certain people are allowed?
That's right. And outside of that, people are sometimes waiting before the recount. We don't let anybody in until we're ready to sit everybody down and go through the instructions. So they're organizing there. The recount is set to begin at 9. I'd like to try before the recount begins to ask one representative from each party to view the lineup of all the blue boxes and to check the lock and seal numbers. We have filled them out on a form. We have a log sheet where we have taken the lock and seal number from the certificate of sealed ballot container that we got from all the towns. We've recorded them here, and then we have a place for the representative for each candidate and for my staff to initial that they viewed that the seal was sealed, the lock was locked, and those numbers are the correct numbers.
And approximately how many blue boxes are there in this recount?
On a page there were probably about
Approximately.
40. Yes.
Thank you. Senator Cushing?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Julie, the ballot boxes that are provided by the state that came from Long Island, were there any visible signs on those boxes that the lock or the seals had been in any way tampered with? And is there, I know you attempted to remove the seal earlier, in the event that a seal had to be removed, is there a procedure that the Secretary of State's office has to walk through for a town clerk to open those seals prior?
Let's say on election night, they're putting things in the blue box and they seal it and they realize, oh, I left, a tally sheet out, or I left this lot of ballots wasn't in there. They would break the seal, they would cross through the seal number, they have an extra seal, they would write the new seal number down on that certificate that they're going to send us. And usually we like to have a little explanation of, needed to reseal something or, why it was done, but it should be done before those materials and all the election officials leave the voting place. So if there needed to be a new seal number, they would cross through one, put the other one, and put a little explanation as why. And that gets signed, and that's the seal that should be on there when we arrive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in regards to Long Island, there was no indication on those tally sheets report sheets that they had to open that box for any reason.
That's right.
It's properly sealed.
I don't know if you got it under there and see. The one I've been showing all along is the one that was at least stated on the form to have been signed at 11:10 p.m. on election night by the warden and the deputy warden, and then we have evidence in the bottom that it was faxed to us at 11:28 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Diamond, and then Senator Gerzofsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Julia, on the seals, the wire that goes into the blue piece, is it possible for that wire to be appear to be in and sealed, but it can be pulled right back out?
Yes. Yes.
So the appearance, it could be the appearance that it's sealed, but in fact it isn't.
If it is in, it kind of has a hourglass shape.
Right.
So if it's in as far as the indentation, it won't pop out. If it's only partly in, it can pop out. And I mean, we do recommend in training that they tug on it to make sure that it's sealed. I mean, I personally have to push pretty hard on that, actually push the plastic part against the hasp in order to get it to seat all the way in.
The casual observer would not be able to determine probably whether it's in the lock position or just sitting in.
Right. I mean, what commonly has happened in other recounts is that pops open in transit. Or when the clerk is bringing it over to the trooper, sometimes it's popped open. We had occasions in years past where the trooper went to take the box and they had put the lock and seal in but not latched it, and then all the contents spilled out, and so they improvised, they put tape around it and signed it and indicated what happened, and we noted that on our log form before the recount started, and fortunately in those instances there were no differences, so.
So when that happens, the only remaining security is the key of the padlock.
That's right.
And one quick thing, I just want to get my timeline right. You said the ballots were transported on the 12th, and the recount started on the 18th, but there had to be a login at some point in your office.
We actually use the transmittals and we go over to the state police sometime before the recounts begin. In this case, we went, the first recount was on the 14th. We went over on the 13th and we checked to make sure that we had all the boxes for all the recounts.
So 12th,
Based on the transmittal forms that we
that
got.
12th they arrived, logged in on the 13th, recount the 18th. And the seal piece may or may not be sealed based on just appearance.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly was sealed because we checked that when we were logging them. So it was sealed indefinitely.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Gerzofsky.
Yes, I want to thank Senator Diamond for bringing that question in. Is that the question I was going to ask, but I had a two-part.
Great minds think alike.
Pardon?
Great minds think alike, Senator. Go ahead.
I'll say pardon again. But talking about the seal, we won't find the original seal on any of the boxes that have been opened. They'll be resealed with a new seal.
Right. And we create the same log where at the end of the recount, maybe it's attached to there, we create another log sheet where we report all the boxes with the new seal. The lock will be the same, but the new seal number, and we don't let everybody leave until the Democrat and Republican come down through and sign off on all the new seal numbers. So on this second, the post after the recount list is the seal that should be on there now. It was affixed at the end of the recount.
Right now, Julie, we will have access to the original seal at some point in this process. You have it someplace
We
in
do
here?
not keep those, no. We go, once they've been signed off on by both sides and they check to make sure everything is sealed, we go down through, we unlock all the boxes and we snip all the seals and we toss the seals. We don't keep them. We never have. I mean, we go through, some of these boxes were coming, for some Senate races, we've counted as much as 28,000 ballots.
Sure, no,
Yeah.
I've been there, and I understand that. I just wanted to make sure what I should expect to see and what I shouldn't expect to see.
Right. You will not see the seal, only that somebody looked at those before we opened any cases. They were looked at by a representative of each candidate and signed off on before we began the recount.
And would I assume that there'd be a representative of the Secretary of State's office that observed that also?
Yes. I mean, it's you know, I mean, as a supervisor of the recount, I'm in the same room, I'm seeing what's happening, I'm not right over there when they're doing it, but I'm seeing my staff go down through with them.
But your staff is sitting over there with
Yes,
their...
absolutely, and they're making sure that, you know, everything is reported correctly.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Senator Saviello.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. Pat, doing great. Question, you seal it, but it's also locked, correct?
That's right.
Who has the key to the lock again? You, but
I have the Grand Master. During the recount, we have the person who's over at the ballot boxes has the key on their person.
in the town, when it's sealed that night, do they have their own key?
Yes, the clerk has their own key because they have to be able to empty those boxes out after the election.
So she's the only one responsible, is there a sign out for that key?
They just have to keep it secure, yeah.
Senator Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as we look at these copies in our package, which are also before us on the screen, these are copies of the actual sheets that were recorded at the recount. And in the column under Breen, you have initials for an individual from her
Yes,
team that reviewed this, and then for Manchester, the same thing, and then finally the Secretary of State in the third.
yes.
So if there were comments with regard to any concern related to these seals and or locks, that would be noted in the final column.
Yes, we would note it when we're doing our login prior to getting this ready, prior to the recount. But if the candidate noticed something, if the representative noticed something, you know, during the process, we would note that. If it was something they noted that we didn't know. But
So just to clarify, there is a separate sheet that your staff uses to verify pre-recount.
no, we just take those transmittal forms from the state police and the certificate of sealed ballot containers that we got from all the towns to make sure the lock and seal that's reported on the certificate is the same as what's on there, and then we fill out this log form and get it ready to be signed off on.
If what we're talking about is the example for Long Island is a ballot transmittal form, you
Yes.
would note if there was a discrepancy on the lock,
Yes,
either with its number or any condition, and there's
Right.
nothing on here that you or your staff identified as an issue of concern.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So now we've got this one box from Long Island, along with 40 for the recount. And again, the law dictates what's supposed to happen. Could you tell us if it did happen and what happened?
well, basically, we bring all the materials, but we're really interested in the beginning in getting a new count. So we go through and do a town-by-town count. What we did this time, because all the towns other than Long Island were tabulated, and those ballots are a little different, and the tally sheets are a little different as a result. So we gave the Long Island ballots to one team, which was our Team A. We have sort of a horseshoe like this, and we have 8 teams of counters, so labeled with each with a different letter. And so we opened the Long Island, one of my staff opened the Long Island box, and I mean, her recollection is usually there's 2 or 3 people, and sometimes Melissa Packard, who's the director of elections, is over helping with that. We're trying to open the containers because we gave those Long Island ballots to Team A, but then we opened all the Cumberland boxes, which were all loose tabulated ballots, and gave them all to the other 7 teams to start sorting and putting into lots of 50 so that we could hand count them. So what I recollect and what, you know, what my staff recollects is open the container and there were 4 lots or bundles of ballots in the Long Island box, each with a tally sheet wrapped around and secured with an elastic.
By the way, you say a team. Who's on the team?
The team consists of a representative for each candidate on one side of the table, sitting side by side, and on the other side of the table, usually on the interior of the horseshoe, is staff from my office. And our staff's job is not to count anything. They can help sort, but basically they're there to provide the lot of 50 to the team. The team takes the ballots. Normally what happens with a hand count is there is a town tally sheet wrapped around the outside. So we have our state tally sheet. I provided you with a copy of the Long Island for the.
Talking about the warden's tally sheet we talked about before?
Well, there is a warden's tally sheet sealed around them, but this is a copy of the tally sheet that we filled out, the Team A filled out.
Right, yes.
So for hand count ballots, we have a two-sided tally sheet. On the left side is where my staff person opens the tally sheet and shows it to the two counters and says, "Do you agree these are the counts that are written here?" And we record that on the left side. So, for example, the first lot that they counted had 50 ballots in it, and on election night they counted 28, 21, one blank, total of 50. Then they put the lot of ballots in between the two counters, and if I am the counter for Kathy Breen, I take a ballot that's marked for Breen and I put it in front of me and start a pile. And if I'm the counter for Kathy Manchester, I take that vote for Kathy Manchester and put it in a pile. And then there will be some ballots that are not marked for either Breen or Manchester. They might be a write-in that isn't cleared, it might be just totally blank, it might be an overvote or something that they agree should be counted for either candidate. And they make a third pile. And then they each count each of the piles and swap so that they each obtain a separate count. Because unlike election night where you're counting 10 or more offices and all those ballot questions, you can't keep shuffling them and separating them. It's not efficient to do that. But when you're counting one race, you take your 50 and you separate it out by votes for candidate A, candidate B, and blanks. And then they count and agree upon the numbers for each of those piles of ballots. So again, they agreed there were 28 for Breen, 21 for Manchester, one blank. They didn't dispute any ballots in that lot, so the total of 50.
And again, there's a left-hand side of that and a right-hand side of it. Could you
Yes.
just again tell us what each of those is? The same
Yeah.
numbers.
So, get my banner here. So the left-hand side is where they are recording what was recorded on election night on the town tally that has been wrapped around those ballots. And then they're on the right-hand side is where they record what they derive from their own count. And sometimes it's different. Even, with a hand count, sometimes it's off by one. They think something is a blank. They apply the rules of voter intent and they decide something shouldn't be counted for a candidate when on election night it might have been.
Okay, so in this particular case, on this block, they were identical, election night and recount day.
That's right.
Okay, so there were three others besides this one.
That's right.
Okay, and what happened with those? Why don't we do the other two blocks of 50 first?
So, we agree. So again, 8-3, they had election night recorded 27, 21, two blanks, and during the recount, they arrived at the same count for this lot.
It's the same, same Republican, same Democrat, same representative from your office on all four of these lots.
That's what we did here, yes. Because this was the only hand count town, we wanted to isolate the tally sheets and the count to one team. It wasn't going to take them long to do that, we thought.
Okay.
So,
Show us the next one.
and then 8-4 is, again, it was 31 to 15, 4 blanks, a total of 50, and that was the same count that the staff got.
Consider it done. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On 83, it just jumped out at me because Manchester had 21 votes. Is there any way that number could have been, is there anything unusual about that number other than it's just 21, it's consequent? I mean, it's just happened to have come off this. Okay. It just jumps out of me.
So then A2 is the one,
Before A2 was counted, did anybody raise any issue with respect to that?
yes. I was up by the tabulation, and my staff person called me over and said, this town tally says there's 21 ballots here, but this feels like there's more than 21 ballots. I said, well, our process is you record the town count on the left side, and we're here to recount and see what the count is on the right side. So to just record that, make sure that they're agreeing with you that that's the numbers that they had recorded. And then when they started to sort the ballots, obviously they came up, there were 42 ballots, including, I believe, the 21 ballots for Manchester were all together. But there were also 9 votes for Breen, 8 for Manchester, and 4 blanks that were part of that lot.
Were you present during the actual counting of those?
I was near the table, yes, I was just kind of watching, but I wasn't really looking at ballots. Again, my staff, they weren't really looking at ballots. I mean, we have found discrepancies from election night before, and we just let them do their count, and, we weren't thinking anything really at that point.
Senator Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Julie, you indicated that one of your staff members, upon removing them from the box, called you over because there appeared visibly to be, or physically to be, more ballots than what. Could you walk through the process of how they remove the ballots from the box and what your staff do to bring them to the table?
We have these wire baskets that we use, and when there are hand count ballots, we take the lots out of the blue box